Welcome to the Heal Podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Goris, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. And I've discovered on my journey that so much more is possible than we can begin to imagine. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Heal Podcast. Today, I'm excited as always, but especially excited to welcome my dear friend Jaiya back to the show. I rarely have had repeat guests, but Jaiya has a book coming out about the erotic blueprints, and we are so excited to dive into that topic yet again because I still blush, as you can see, when talking about sex. So we're going to talk about all of that. But first, a little about Jaiya. Jaiya is an award-winning somatic sexologist, author, founder, creator of the Erotic Blueprint breakthrough, and she's the star of Netflix Sex, Love, and Goop. For over 3 decades, Jaiya has been immersed in the study of turn-ons, ancient erotic rituals, tantric sex, mastery of sensual touch, pure erotic play, kinky dynamics, and the biology and psychology of attraction and sexual fulfillment. Jaiya is widely recognized as a leader in the field of sexology. She works with all kinds of bodies and sexual orientations, and through observation and clinical research, she discovered the Erotic Blueprint, a map of arousal that reveals one's specific erotic language and patterning and helps create a path forward to greater sexual fulfillment. Growing up, Jaiya was fascinated by sex. It was clear early on that her goal in life is to educate and help others to create their most satisfying sex lives and erotic ecstasy. I mean, you knew this at a very young age. It's fascinating. We'll get into that. Today, Jaiya helps individuals and couples learn more about their sexuality so that they can create lasting passion, deepen connection, and experience ultimate pleasure in all areas of their lives. Jaiya aims to shift the cultural view of sexuality as negative, wrong, and shameful to healthy and worthy of cultivation and celebration. What a great topic to discuss.
I've been busy.
You are busy, girl. Oh my gosh. Well, welcome. Congratulations on your book.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me back.
Of course, anytime. I mean, you and I talk frequently, and you're basically a therapist of sorts to me, in so many ways, and much beyond just sexology. So we'll get into that as well. But I guess let's start by giving our listeners just a little bit of that background where you knew early on that sex was like your thing. And I mean, I just admire that freedom so much because, as we talked about before, and as I've mentioned many times on this podcast, I'm a recovering Catholic, so there's a lot of shame around sex and even talking about sex. And so it's uncomfortable every time I have this conversation with you, but it's also like so exciting. I loved listening back to our first episode because we covered so much, and I'm excited to go even a little deeper today.
Mm-hmm.
Deeper.
Deeper. This idea that sex is something that's shameful and inherently, we're bad or wrong because we're having sex or desire sex. And somewhere in my own blueprint, my own sexual blueprint, even as an early age, I knew it was something that was going to be my passion in life. I was like the kid who was like, storks? No, not storks. Not storks. Let me tell you the whole real truth about sex. And then I just became like, I'm going to become Dr. Ruth. Somehow I must have seen her somewhere and decided that sex was the thing that was going to be my passion in life. It was either that or an opera singer. Okay. And I developed a vocal cord injury, which I lost my voice for like almost 10 years. I didn't sing. And so it was decided I was going to be a sexologist. That was it.
Okay. I'm picturing you now like singing out with this like belting out when you have orgasms. Like, is that somehow did they come back together, those two passions?
Yeah. Of course, sound. I mean, I actually have another book about oral sex, and I talk about how becoming an opera singer helped me give great oral sex because, all the lip buzzing and the tongue exercises and all of the things that you do there, but also just making sound during sex. I think, again, because it's something shameful, it's something that we hold sound in. And it is a principle in terms of having great sex. Can you make sound? Can you make those moans and those groans? And the more ecstatic you get, can that sound get bigger? And can that sound bellow out? Because that can take us into expanded states of consciousness. It was part of Tantra. Is sound is one of the, mantra and the vibration of sound. And so that helps you ride on that orgasmic frequency even more, even tapping into the orgasm of the cosmos when you get into making those big sounds.
Yeah. And you even talk about sexuality or sex and pleasure as kind of the final frontier of spiritual awakening or personal development. Why? You don't normally, associate getting sexual freedom as an integral or paramount part of your spiritual awakening. I guess you do if you're tantric, but for us just over here in like normal personal development land, we often, probably because of shame or conditioning, social conditioning, don't even like bring sex into the conversation.
Right. And yeah, so why it's the final frontier of personal growth and why it's part of our own personal awakening and sexual awakening. I believe that we put the shadow parts of ourselves in the places we don't want to look. And so we do all this personal growth, like, okay, we're going to do psychology, or we're going to do our health and wellness. We're going to go into manifestation. We're going to go into all these different aspects, but let's not look at sex. And so that's oftentimes the last place people look, but it's a powerful place. And because it is the last place that we look, and it has so much energy and charge around it, it can be an accelerator for our growth because it's tied to so many other aspects of life. Sexuality, we're all a product of sex. And I think we forget that. Like, somebody had sex in order for us to be here. And when we demonize sex, we demonize all of humanity. And so then we have this piece of like, there's some part of me that's not okay, some part of me that's always not okay. And when we become at peace with that, we become more whole. And we're integrating these aspects of ourselves that we cut off. So, that desire is not okay, I'm going to cut that piece off. Or that sexual behavior is not okay, I'm going to cut that piece off. That thought isn't okay, I'm going to cut that piece off. And before we know it, we've got all these pieces of ourselves in closets or tucked away in boxes or even behind lock and key in our psyche. We don't even know we've locked them away. And then we're able to unravel and start to unlock and start to see, oh, wait a minute, there's that little teenage girl part of myself that I put away back then. And what would happen if I bring her out and I integrate her into my own wholeness? And so then we become more whole, we become more well. And then looking at what Tantrika is taught, or with some of like the Taoists and places where sexuality was not cut off of our spiritual growth, sexuality was used as a tool. We have these polarities of masculine and feminine, or light and dark. And how are we integrating that into oneness? How are we integrating that into, again, wholeness? And so we take masculine principles and feminine principles in Tantra, and we unify those into a cosmic dance together, which is the ultimate orgasm with the universe. And there we go. Now we've got a spiritual awakening or mystical experience that can happen from the sexual journey.
Ooh, I mean, yes, it makes so much sense. As I've mentioned before, and many regular listeners have heard me say this ad nauseum, but this past year has been about me coming back to myself and waking up to where I've abandoned myself. And, and then as I've done all this healing work, it's like accepting all of ourselves. And that the big part of that, is shadow and shame and guilt and like looking at all those things. So for me, I haven't gone there yet. And we're in November, end of November, December right now. So I don't think I'm going to, wrap that one up this year, but it's something that I look forward to continue to work with you on, because there is so much shadow still remaining around sex. And as I step into this new chapter of just full expression and freedom and authenticity, and just like dropping the fear of showing up fully as me, sex is a big part of that. Pleasure, sex, right? Like my body, like, and just like allowing and accepting what it is that brings me pleasure and what I need, which brings us to the erotic blueprints. Because much like the 5 love languages that I'm sure all of you are aware of, and just the 5 love languages, becoming aware of that and profoundly shifting, but really subtly shifting the way couples can interact, knowing, oh, I've been kind of forcing my love language onto my husband or my partner. And they don't interpret love the way I do. So this is their love language, and you start to shift things. And you've come up with all of your work and experience. You've come up with the 5 erotic languages. And it's kind of 5 different sexual personality types. And it's just so fascinating. And I honestly, like, the most powerful part of this book is when you were so vulnerable to say, look, I'm the leader in my field. I'm like the leading sexologist, and my partner and I were on different planets when it came to intimacy and sex. Like, for you to admit that, like, I'd love for you to start there and lead us into how you discovered and what the blueprints are.
Great. So yeah, I talk about how a sexologist ended up in a sexless relationship in the book. And, it was just like, it was a really painful moment, because here I am with my partner, and I would come to bed and I would initiate sex in one blueprint, which I'll go into, and he would just get so turned off. He would be like, why are you doing that? Like almost like I was putting something on him, some kind of pressure on him. And then he would like cuddle with me, and I'd kind of roll my eyes and be like, why is he cuddling again? Like, okay, we're not going to have sex again. He's just going to cuddle and fall asleep. And I'd roll over and cry myself to sleep at night, because here I am, this is my career. This is what I do for a living. I've written the books on all the sex techniques, and I had all the tips, and I knew how to do everything really great. So what was wrong in my own relationship? And that really set me on a journey in that, that vulnerable time of, how do we heal this? We also had a new baby at the time, so there were other like circumstances in life. His business had crashed. I think that also has a big effect on, libido and how he was functioning. And so this just what seemed like a mismatch, or seemed like an incompatibility. And I like to say sexual incompatibility is a myth. We're not sexually incompatible. We just don't speak the same language. And the issue there, though, however, is how willing are you to do the work to learn the language of your lover? How willing are you to go on your own sexual journey, to explore your own sexual freedom, to do your own sexual healing? And at that time, I also had a lot of trauma that was still, even though I'd done so much work, I'd done all the things for 20, 25 years of my life, there were just aspects of trauma that I couldn't get to, that were still playing out. And even though my life at that time I checked all the boxes, I had a very successful multi-million-dollar career. I have the house, I have the kid, I have all these things, and everybody looking at me from the outside would be like, oh my gosh, you're so successful. There was something inside of me that was still really unfulfilled. And I think, we hear it all the time, like money and success and all these things are not the things that are going to make you happy or fill that part of you. It's not something external from you. Those things are beautiful and nice, and they make the dream better, but those external circumstances were not it. And that's when I went on a search for self. You're talking about like going inside and who am I really? I started asking very different questions, because this was such a painful time in our relationship. And out of exploring all of that, new things started to be born, including the 5 erotic blueprints.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that I love that you had that experience. And I feel like that happens so often in life, where we wake up and we're like, wait, I'm preaching about health and wellness and possibility, and then I'm so stuck in my own life, which then leads you to self-reflection and growth. And then for you, it led you on this. It needed to happen for you to discover the disconnect, and then find the solution for it, which is these 5 erotic languages. So break them down for us. And then I wanted to, I did the quick quiz. I should have done the longer quiz before the in-depth one, because then it gives you like percentages of what you are.
Percentages of each one. Right.
Okay. But we'll get into that, because you'll probably intuitively know what mine are. But break down the 5 erotic, languages, and a little bit about each of them.
So the 5 blueprints, the first one is energetic. And the energetic is someone who's turned on by space tease, longing, yearning, anticipation. So if you've ever been with somebody and you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to kiss them, like you're sitting in that like anticipation of your first kiss or the first touch, you're out with somebody, that moment is where all the juice is for the energetic. They also can go into these expanded states of consciousness, really having like big multidimensional experiences in other realms, within that energetic superpower. So they can have orgasm without being touched, and talk about like Tantra and these energetic, big universal orgasms and unity and mystical experience. That's very much of something that can fall within the energetic blueprint. And there's so much turn on and juice within that. And then the shadow side of the energetic is that they short circuit. They just cut off, they dissociate from their body. It's too much, too quick, too fast. Like you can't go for their genitals super fast because they don't have enough time for that breathing room of longing, that breathing room of tease and anticipation. The second one is the sensual, and the sensual is someone who's turned on by what we think of with our senses. So taste, smell, beautiful sight. The superpower of the sensuals, they bring the beauty and the artistry to the erotic experience. They can have also non-genital orgasms other places on their bodies. So like behind the knee or the neck or the nipples, like places that aren't necessarily primary erogenous zones, can be very orgasmic for the sensual. The shadow side is getting caught up in your head. You're thinking about your to-do list and all the things that are wrong in the room, or your partner's breath, or something else in your body, and you're not fully paying attention to all the pleasure that's happening because you're caught up in your thoughts. The third one is the sexual, and the sexual is someone who's turned on by what we think of as sex in our culture. So we think of intercourse, we think of climax, we think of nudity, getting to that orgasm. That is very, very sexual definition. And so sexual superpowers, they can go from 0 to 60. So really fast arousal, and oftentimes sex feels very easy to them. It's just like, yeah, what? It's sex. Let's get to it. Come on.
Yeah.
The shadow side of that, however, is missing out on all the journey. And it often feels to them like, what's wrong with everybody else? Like this is what sex is. Like, why are we not having it all the time? Why, like this kind of, it's so easy.
Right.
And this is what the definition of sex is. So when something falters, like let's say someone has erectile dysfunction, or they're not getting wet, or they're not feeling how they normally feel as life changes, all of a sudden then we can't have sex because they don't recognize that there's all this other aspect to sexuality than just the intercourse or just the nudity.
Got it. Okay.
Then the kinky is someone who's turned on by the taboo, and that's anything that's taboo for you. So that could be, having sex out of the missionary position for the first time if you've never done that before. So it's a wide range. It's if it feels naughty, if it feels like it's got that edge to it, then that is within the kinky. And there's two types of kinky. There's psychological kink, which is where it's more about what's happening in your own mind, or it's the power play or the power dynamic there. And then there's sensation based, which is more like ropes or impact, spanking, something like that might be more sensation based in the kinky. The shadow side is shame. So I feel shame because I have these desires that are outside of the box or outside of the norm. Why am I like this? And that shame then can harbor, things just becoming more stagnant and stuck, or it makes it that this only thing can be my turn on, like only spanking can be my turn on. And you miss out again on all the other aspects that could be there, that could be part of your turn on. And then the final one is the shapeshifter. And the shapeshifter is someone who's turned on by all those things. They want it all. They want it now. They want it all the time. Shapeshifters have voracious appetites for pleasure. The great thing about the shapeshifter is that they can shapeshift to be a lover to anybody because they know how to speak. If these were languages, like you were mentioning, this is like they speak every language. So they can go any country and they can explore and they can speak the language of anybody that's out there. The problem with that, however, is they're always shapeshifting to please other people. And then they're the most starving of all the blueprints because they have such a wide variety and voracious appetite that they often aren't getting fed. And they're often told they're too much, and they're not too much. It's just that they're very erotically sophisticated. They're very intelligent, and they just need a lot. There's the satiation is their practice. Like, can I be satisfied and not always craving more and more and more and more? I believe that we're all shapeshifters. I think we all just get conditioned out of being a shapeshifter, and our blueprint shows us where we're actually limited because we're more full spectrum beings. We're all of it. And so I think a lot of people after doing this work become shapeshifters naturally because it's true to who we are.
It's as you were saying, describing all 5 of them and taking the test and assuming that I was more one and getting a different result. I'm like, I feel like I have aspects of all of them, but because of shame, because of conditioning, because of fear, because of trauma, I've shut down various parts of each blueprint, which is so interesting because that's what you just said. As you're talking and as you shared your experience and you have such knowledge, so you were able to work through and kind of understand a language and figure out what the issue was with your partner, with your lover, and learn to speak a new language. So like you said, it's all teachable, right? There's no sexual chemistry is a myth. Like you can get there if you learn the other's language and learn your own. What is like in society, it's just sex in marriage and over time, it's like such a sad state of affairs, like I just know married couples that have been together for 10, 15, 20 years and even even like 2 years and the sex frequency goes down. So what do you see as, and I'm sure so many people listening are like, I want to have more sex, but I'm just too tired. I'm too stressed. Like, what do you see? How are we going to shift that? Like, what is your vision or what do you want to say to those people? Besides, get the book and learn your language and learn your lover's language. How do we shift out of this dismal landscape of marital sex these days?
Yeah, I think we have to look at it from many points of view. One, and I touched on this already, what's the level of willingness? Do you really want this? And I think this is something that Esther Perel says, one of my friends who's also brilliant, just a brilliant therapist. She says, you have to have sex worth wanting. And I think a lot of people don't want the sex they're having. So then they're like, well, I don't really want to work on my sex life because why? Like, I'd
what
rather
am I fighting for? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I need sleep.
And so I think that one of the things that's important is to recognize what's possible when it comes to our eroticism. And there isn't anything wrong with you. I think we get this idea that like we're wrong, we're broken, something's not right because I'm not having the sex this person's having, or I'm not having like this mind-blowing orgasm thing. And I like to talk about orgasmic possibilities because I want people to know what's possible and that there is something worth wanting and that there is a reason why we want to have great sex. And part of that is health and wellness and longevity. There are many, many health benefits to sex, boost immune system. It actually helps the brain. If we get into neural ruts, we can expand the brain, we can expand consciousness. Sex just isn't this thing that we do where we hump around on each other and then maybe we have we procreate or something like that. Sex is a tool for expanding consciousness. Sex is something that feels pleasure in our life, and when we're in pleasure, we have more radiance, we have longevity, we have more fuel to go about our day because things are pleasurable. And so even this word dismal, I feel like we walk around dismal anyway. We're not having sex. Maybe that's why. Sex is aliveness. It's our aliveness. Our sex hormones are our youth hormones. And there's so many reasons why sex is so beneficial to us. It's just that we're not having sex that's worth wanting. And we're not having sex that really is utilizing the benefits. So that's the first step. The first step is sex is awesome. So let's have better sex.
Yeah.
And let's go on the journey. Let's make that choice to go, okay, I'm going to go on the journey to sexual awakening. I'm going to go on the journey to find out what Jaiya is talking about this great thing called sex. Because maybe in your life, listening to this, you're like, yeah, I haven't had great sex. I don't know what the big deal is. Why do people even want to be doing it? Or yeah, like sex is good, but I'd rather do something else. So it's that, again, that thing of that choice. I want to now have great sex. I want to have a quality of sex. And it isn't necessarily about quantity. So, some people are like, oh, I need to have sex every day. But are you still having a good quality of sex in that daily practice? I call it a practice. To me, sex is a daily practice, like yoga. It's just like anything else that I'm doing. It's like eating good food. I got to get my O vitamin in every day. Before I start my day. I start my day in pleasure. I think there's a lot of talk about being trauma informed, but pleasure is also healing. And so what about being pleasure informed? And are you pleasure informed? Do you understand the benefits of pleasure in your life and of leading a life filled with pleasure? And so once we've made the decision to go on the journey, then it's unraveling everything that you've learned about sex. People say, oh, we don't have sex education. No, we have sex education. It's just really bad sex education. And so what did you learn? What were the messages? What are the messages about your body? What are you still storing trauma-wise that's unhealed or unconscious? And start with you. Don't think your partner is the one to blame, or you have to wait until they come on board. Now, there is something to be said about having an unwilling partner. When you have an unwilling partner who doesn't go on the journey with you, then you have some choices to make, around, am I going to stay here where my needs aren't being met erotically, or where I don't have a person who I can explore with? And then that's a conversation about a lot of different things. One could be opening the relationship, changing the relationship form. How do you stay in love, when you have an unwilling partner? Because you can do it with an open heart and still talk about, how am I going to get my needs met in my own personal exploration?
I think this discovery of these 5 erotic blueprints and this book that you've written is such a gift, because as you're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, like probably a great majority of the affairs happen because the person feels shame about their erotic language, and so they go seek it elsewhere in the shadow, right? And and I'm sure there's other psychological and emotional and unhealed trauma stuff coupled with it, but it just feels like with a couple who's in love, but that part of their life is not thriving, which many people I know, if they can give themselves the gift of like reading this and learning their blueprint, and then start to do the work of like, oh, it's destigmatizing, like, oh, kinky is actually like normal, and it's a thing, and it's a language, and it's my language. And
and so wrong with me.
And there's nothing wrong with me. And then for like the partner who's like maybe raised a little bit more, conservative, and is like thought something was wrong and judged their partner because they get turned on by weird things in their mind. There's just like a level of acceptance that you're laying out and defining, and giving people the opportunity to learn more about themselves, which I love. I'm like all into human design. Like the more information I can get reflected back about me, the more I can go, oh yeah. And more I can accept myself and go, oh, that's why I operate that way. And that's okay. It's the way I'm designed. So this is like, I feel like this book and the blueprints are actually going to help people not only accept themselves, but accept their partner. And then with a little willingness, it just takes communication and practice, like you said, to completely transform their relationship and sex life.
100%. And that comes down to, okay, now we're on the same page. Now we're starting to have sex that's really yummy and delicious because we're feeding each other in our blueprint. Like that's the next. So we have all this awareness at the beginning and the willingness, and okay, now we're going to go on the journey. And then now we're starting to cultivate the spire. Now we're in a totally different place, like my partner and I. So for example, when we took the quiz, he was 0% sexual and I was 0% kinky. His number one primary blueprint, kinky. My primary blueprint, sexual.
Wow.
I was 5% sensual and he was 5% energetic. My secondary blueprint, energetic. His secondary blueprint, sensual.
Completely inverse.
Complete opposite. And so this goes again to like, it's not about compatibility. And it's not even about sexual chemistry. And I think that that can be a tricky one for some people's brains because they're like, oh, I need to have all this sexual chemistry and heat in order to make it last. And I'm in an open relationship. My partner and I are in an open relationship. And I have a lover who's been with me for 20 years. We have zero sexual chemistry, zero sexual chemistry. We've been together for 20 years.
What?
And we have the hottest, energetic, erotic experiences of anybody I'm with. We have a completely like energetic tantric relationship. And part of what I love about it is that we don't rely on chemistry. We rely on alchemy. And this is very much of a tantric principle, but something that I think anybody can look at when they're looking at like, oh, I just don't feel like we have sexual chemistry. It's like, well, if you love somebody, then what about creating alchemy? And what I love about alchemy is that it's not at the effect of biochemistry. It's not at the effect of, and we have a nerve in our nose called cranial nerve 0 that smells the pheromones of someone else. And so this is the chemistry. It smells the pheromones and it goes into the brain and it says, this is a good mate based on their immune system.
Wow.
So it's reading to see, is that person's immune system and your immune system going to create a really awesome offspring with a solid immune system?
No way.
That to me is fascinating.
Yeah.
They did this study, it was called the t-shirt study, where they gave women t-shirts of men to smell that had their pheromones on it. And if they were on birth control, their brain didn't do this. It interfered with the ability for them to smell the best match that would be chemical, their best chemical match.
Yeah.
And so, we have all these things that affect our biochemistry all the time. And then as you age, menopause, that's going to be another change in your biochemistry. So when we talk about longevity and relationship and going on this sexual journey, I think there's magic in going, okay, well, what about alchemy? How do we create this thing called alchemy, which is about now taking energies and polarization and vibration and manifesting something new? It's the ancient Egyptians, talked about alchemy. Some of the ancient cultures talk about this alchemy, which also we have a pharmacy inside our own body that can create this alchemy within us for our own awakening. And that my very first awakening, I was in my early 20s when I met the person I'm talking about. His name's Christian. And we had all this energy together and I avoided him for 2 years because I was just like, oh, this is too much. And finally, the universe brought us together and he kissed my toe. He just kissed my toe. And the energy shot through my whole body. And I went into a full-on mystical experience. And when I kind of came out of the mystical experience, we're holding each other. He's weeping on my chest. And he's just like, I didn't know. Oh my God, I didn't know. How could I have hurt you? Like he's having a past life experience. Like we went into like a whole other thing. We completely unified. And sometimes you have those kinds of relationships. Like, again, no chemistry, but we created alchemy that brought us into oneness, brought us into unity consciousness. And so this is possible. You go into, now you're having hot, juicy sex. And then the next thing you know, you're moving into a transformational state of consciousness within sex where it brings you to the truth of who you are.
And so, I mean, I shouldn't get too personal, but Ian, totally fine with Christian?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They absolutely love each other.
Okay, I'm sure. I think that may be the answer for everybody. Well, this is so funny because when you talk, when I read the book, I was like, oh, I'm for sure an energetic because I love anticipation and I love just like that tension of can't have you yet. You know what I mean? Like all
the
of that.
energetic.
So I just assumed I was an energetic. And then I was like, oh, there's a little sensual because I tend to get a little heady and distracted. And then there's like a little, I know that there's some kinky stuff, and I just like wrote it off as like Catholicism because everything was taboo, right? And you always felt God was watching and judging and you're sinning and there's just all this language around.
I grew up Roman Catholic, by the way, too. And I would be like so naughty all night long and then go sing in church choir, like,
and
dancing.
So I guess like my question would be, like you said, I think I'm aspects of all of it. I've shut so much down and I'm kind of like, I think intellectually I know what's possible, but I'm kind of just like I think my biggest fear is control. And I do, I'm such a spiritual person. I have had mystical experiences, and, in orgasm, which is just so embarrassing for me to even vocalize to a public audience. I hope my mom is
You
not
did
listening.
it.
Like I sense and know deeply that there is that potential. And I'm also think I'm freaking terrified. Like my issue is control with sex. And I think that some of it comes from like painful, traumatic experiences when I was younger. And some of it comes from this existential fear of, oh shit, I am afraid of what will happen if I let go and like go into this. So I'm just like, all right, let's, how do I let go?
Well, we have tools. So let's talk about the dual control model of sexual response. So we have inhibitors and we have brakes. And inhibitors are the parts of us that go, don't have sex, right? And some of us have the handbrake on all the time. We're trying to drive the car and we have the handbrake on all the time, which is the inhibitor is kind of running all the time, which is Catholic upbringing. Don't do this, have control. Those are inhibitors. And then we have our exciters, which are like the accelerator in a car. And that's, just like, here we are, like, let's pour fuel on the fire. And these are the things that turn us on. So that's the accelerator. Emily Nagoski talks about this in her book, Come As You Are. She uses this accelerator brakes analogy, which I think is a brilliant analogy, because if we have the brake on, no matter how much we put on the accelerator, we're going to not go anywhere. And some of us always keep that handbrake on. Trauma, again, need to be in control. These are the things that inhibit us. And so, this is why people drink alcohol. They drink alcohol because they want to lower inhibition. We say this.
Yeah.
And our brain is always scanning for what's sexually relevant. It's just that our inhibitors are keeping us from acting on these turn-ons. And so when it comes to like sexual freedom and freedom of our expression, I think it's important to look at, well, what's been inhibiting you? Is it past trauma that's unhealed, that hasn't been freed from your body yet? Is it religious upbringing and religious trauma? Is it that it's just inappropriate right now for me to be having sex? That's an appropriate inhibitor. We don't want to be having sex in the middle of the street. And there's some people who don't have enough inhibitor. That's where we get sexual compulsion. That's where we get people who feel like, they're dependent upon having sex to feel good because they're escaping in some way. And so we all are balancing this all the time. We want this to be in harmony, this whole system. So how do we then lower inhibition that's healthful? I think that's the question, so we're not relying on alcohol or something to lower our inhibitions. And one of the ways is breath work. Just getting more breath in your body and starting to play with like holotropic breath work from Stan Grof. That can be a way. I learned very early on, my teenage years, how to use breath with self-pleasure. So one way to start dipping your toe in is in your self-pleasure practice, getting yourself into an arousal state, getting yourself into a place where those inhibitors are not going to come up necessarily. Start to use some breath, just open mouth breath and playing with changing your breath patterns. That can be one thing. Intention. My intention here is to explore my inhibitors and help lower them within this, practice session around sex. Things like dance, music, they can be also things that lower your inhibition in very healthful ways. Yeah, just like getting in the body movement. I love Sheila Kelly's S Factor. I don't know if you've ever done that or
I did. Yeah. I was training for like a audition for a role of this like back in the day. And so I took a pole dancing class with a private. It felt amazing. It was so empowering. I was like, hell yeah, to the strippers of the world. They're like, yeah. I felt good. I felt strong and felt in my body and just, like a sexual goddess,
That feeling, So there's all kinds of practices, there's rituals, and in Tantra, even there's embodying a goddess. So you just talked about I felt like a goddess. So one of the things that I'm really into practicing right now, I'm deep in my practice, is called a Vajrayogini practice. And she's a deity from Tantric Tibetan Buddhism. And she incarnated as a female Buddha to just be kind of like F off all of the masculine, like that say that females can't become Buddhas, because they used to say like, oh, you have to be reincarnated as a man in order to become a Buddha and an awakened being. And so she's like, well, let me come in a female form to just show that gender doesn't have anything to do with it.
I'm into it.
And but she's wild. She's like very sexual, and she's naked, and she's just, and there's just beautiful movement of her body and her expressions. And so every day I do a Vajrayogini practice as part of my daily morning, and embodying her, of like, I'm embodying the goddess, and I'm going to walk through the world as this female Buddha who takes sexual energy and transmutes it into unconditional love. She takes the shadow of the world and she transmutes it into unconditional love. So all the sexual energy that I have, let's just utilize it for the liberation of all beings on the planet. Like, that's who she is.
It's noble work.
So I think that, these practices can be powerful. And I'm also very highly energetic. So I'm drawn to that as a turn on. That just turns me on to embody the goddess. That does take my inhibitors down.
I just, as you're talking, like, if, getting there, but like, it is important to have a partner that's kind of willing to even have this kind of conversation or meet you where you are. Like, what do you say to the, listeners out there that are in just your basic hetero relationship, or maybe it's even, I guess gender doesn't matter, or like the sexual preference doesn't matter. But just kind of that like status quo, it's just dwindled over they're basing their sexual lives on attraction, which without effort or communication or alchemy of any sort is going to diminish just naturally over time. So I guess, like, how can we want to stay with a partner, love our partner in so many other ways? And, what is her name? The Buddha?
Vajrayogini.
Like, if I just want to like Vajrayogini it up every day and I'm doing my thing and I'm like, which I'm not talking about my partner. He I'm sure would be down for any Vajrayoginiing, but like just in general, just like, I just want to like kind of infuse hope and like gasoline into a lot of people's relationships that I have just kind of gone stale out of. We just don't know any different. Like, so if you're with a partner that it's like, he's just kind of, or she isn't really into or open to having this kind of exploration or conversation, they just like want to do their thing. What do you say to that the other half that wants to do the work and wants to step more into like embrace their blueprint and explore it more?
That makes sense. A couple of things. So one is, if your partner's just completely unwilling to have the conversation, like they don't want to talk about sex, they don't want to go on a sexual journey, they don't want to do the work, like they're just a no to that experience.
They're just like, dude, let's just have sex once a week.
Yep.
In the normal way we've always had it. And like, that's it.
I don't need anything more.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's true. I mean, I see that in my practice, where there can be people who are just like, nope, I'm not interested in exploring this. And that then there's a different choice. It's a different conversation. And that conversation is one, okay, well then how do I get my sexual needs met? If we are now in a relationship, I call that like a mixed orientation relationship. You have a mix of one person wanting one thing and one person wanting another thing, and an unwillingness to meet or shift that orientation. And so because that's there, do we open the relationship? Where I can get my needs met outside? And then what does that look like? Does that look like don't ask, don't tell? Does that look like I come back and tell you? Does that, like, what are the agreements around creating a new paradigm of what that relationship would look like? I talked about my relationship where we don't have the sexual chemistry. And part of why we don't have sexual chemistry is because he's gay.
Wow.
And so, well, what happens then? We're totally madly in love with each other, but he's gay. Do we end our relationship and our love for each other because of that? Because we have a mixed orientation? Wow. Or do we figure that out? It took us 17 years to figure that out, and a lot of pain. to
Wow.
figure out that relationship. But you know what? We were willing to stay in it and figure that relationship out to where we can stay in a mixed orientation relationship. He jokes, I'm just a Jaiya sexual. I'm gay plus Jaiya.
A plus Jaiya.
But that wouldn't work for me if I was monogamous, right? So that's why then I have Ian, I have another partner who isn't, who we don't have mixed orientation. And so things work. But that's not right for everybody. Maybe you want to stay monogamous. So then the question is, okay, I'm monogamous by nature. I want to stay monogamous. Do we end the relationship consciously then? Do we go into conscious uncoupling and we go then on our own way, but we're still staying in love? My recommendation is always leave in love. You don't leave in hatred and come to falling in love with that person all over again and leave anyway, which is very painful. I'm not saying it's easy. It's an easy choice to make. And then the other is, maybe then you just go on your own exploration. And this is what I see a lot of people do is like, I'm not ready to leave the relationship. I still love this person. We have kids together, all of these things that are happening in our lives. So I'm going to go on my own exploration. My partner Ian is interested in Tantra, but he doesn't have the depth that my partner Christian has. And then I'm on my own journey as well. And so I love exploring these things all on my own and going very deep all on my own. I have my own relationship with sexuality. Sex isn't just something that happens with a partner. Sex is something that happens inside of me. My eroticism is my own. It's my own aliveness. No partner required for me to go on a journey of sexual awakening. And if anything, when you go on this journey of sexual awakening, your partner starts to see a difference in you. And your partner starts to go, wait a minute, maybe there's something for me there.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what I see happen, not all the time, but sometimes what I see happen is your own growth, your own awakening, then helps your partner come along because they see such a shift in you that you didn't put pressure on them to do, that you didn't try to get them to change, that something in them has to shift in order to stay in your vibrational frequency.
That's the when Harry met Sally moment. I'll have what she's having.
Yeah.
The best moment.
Yeah.
I'll have what she's having. Yeah. And, just as you're talking and just couples that I think that, this could be a great tool for couples. Like, if a lot of my listeners are female, they pick up the book for themselves to learn more about themselves and then go, hey, maybe we read this together and kind of have a joke about it or have a laugh about it. Or let's find out what yours is. And it's a great kind of icebreaker. And then, just naturally, if you guys love each other and want to improve your sex life, this is a great place to start, and
there's a lot of
exercises. Yeah.
There's a lot of exercises in there, not just, I like to not just talk about things, but like, let's take them in the body. So, a very simple exercise that you could do, I'm just going to give it to you. You don't need to get the book to necessarily have this one, but is just to sit across from each other and start to open up a dialogue, which is called a dyad, where you go back and forth. Tell me something you want me to know about you and sex. Tell me something you want me to understand about you and sex, just so we're building understanding. It's not about agreement, but it's about building understanding with each other. And you just go back and forth. Tell me something you want me to understand about you and sex, back and forth, back and forth. And it's when you understand them, you just say thank you. And now you're building intimacy with each other. You're building, to me, this is foreplay. We're like talking about sex and it's juicy and we're opening up a conversation and I'm getting to understand new things about my partner all the time. I've been with my partner, Ian, for over 16 years and we're still discovering you don't stop growing. You don't stop, discovering these things about each other. So I love doing these dyads because they build intimacy and they build understanding with each other. So it's a very simple way to just start to open up the conversation.
I want to just go a little deeper into the dyad because we worked, we've been working recently and again, like sex doesn't even come into the conversation. You've become this like wonderful friend therapist. Your training is so vast, or your education and your ability to get to the root and help me excavate to get to what's really going on and what's at the truth, the core truth that's driving my emotions or my pain or my, outlook. And this dyad that you just taught me, it was just so loving. Explain, I guess, where you learned it, what discipline you learned it from, and then walk me through, because that one was specifically about sex. But I just think this is so powerful for people and can be applicable to any relational, not even conflict, but issue. And it's just such a loving way to communicate. So to break down the dyad just as a takeaway for people, and where did you learn this? I'm just constantly in awe of your vast training and education from all sorts of disciplines.
So Jivarad Slavinsky.
Say that 5 times fast.
That's quite a mouthful. Jivarad Slavinsky, he's no longer with us, but he's a Serbian psychotherapist who wanted to help people through these different technologies come to truth, deeper truths about ourselves through any emotional charge that you have. So anything that isn't an emotional charge. So he has about 50 different technologies, and a lot of them are based on this idea of dyads. When I very first learned it, however, was through Tantra. We would simply sit across from each other and go, what's present? What's present now? And now what's present? And now what's present? We would just say what's present over and over and over again until you actually came into the present moment. And it was so powerful for me. I remember that just being such a big experience for myself in my early 20s of experiencing the present moment through just these back and forth dyads. And so when I came across Jivarad's work, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, because he had taken it into these effective communication styles. And the particular one that you and I discussed was called the REDS dyad, which is called a relationship evolving dyad. And I learned it from Sachin Raja, who he has something called Transcendent CEO. And it's all people in business who are really spiritual. We're here for a spiritual purpose in our businesses. And I became a master coach through his training in Canada and the United States. So I studied with him. And so the relationship evolving dyad starts with, you want to create connection between you and your partner. So it starts with, tell me something you love about me. Just to start opening your hearts to each other. So if you're having a conflict, to even start with, tell me something you love about me. I've even used this in couples who are getting a divorce and things are really ugly. And we just take the time to do this dyad, and then it shifts drastically, all the between people. It starts to open their hearts, and they start to get on the same page with these relationship evolving dyads. So tell me something you love about me. You do that for about 20 minutes, back and forth, back and forth. Tell me something you love about me. And then we move from that to tell me something you want me to understand about you and whatever the topic you're having a conflict about. So this could be sex, this could be love, this could be our divorce, whatever it is that you are struggling. Money is a big struggle, I know, for a lot of couples. So tell me something you want me to understand about you and whatever that topic is. And remember, you're not seeking to agree, you're seeking to understand.
Ooh, that's the nugs right there.
That's the thing, because everything in you wants to have a conversation and to argue. You'll notice it, right? They'll say something and you'll be like, I don't agree with that. And you'll have to quiet that part of your mind to go, wait a minute, do I understand that? Not do I agree with it, but do I understand what they're saying and their point of view? Because all we're doing in this effective, that's why it's a communication, not a conversation, is that we are going, if I understand, I just say thank you. I don't add anything. I don't put my 2 cents in. I don't need to have the last word. I just say thank you. And if you don't understand, there are some other prompts. Like you can say it again. You could say, clarify that. If they went on for a really long time, you could say, summarize that. So there's 3 other prompts: clarify it, summarize it, or say it again. But thank you if you understand. And then the final, and you'll do that again, 20 minutes, back and forth, back and forth. And then the final one is, tell me something you think we agree upon about whatever the topic is, same topic you just did. So tell me something you think we agree upon about sex. Tell me something you think we agree upon about sex. And again, even though the word agree is in there, it's not about agreeing. It's what they think you agree upon about this thing. And you're seeking to understand that. and that builds affinity. Now you're starting to see like where you are on the same page, because there will be things that they say that you actually do agree upon.
Yeah.
And you'll see like, oh, we actually have some shared reality. So we've connected with love. We've opened our hearts.
Feels good. It makes our relationship healthier. It brings us closer together. It's good for our health. It relaxes us after stress, Yeah.
All the things about sex that you think.
Yeah. That I would assume people mostly would agree on.
Yeah. So that's the relationship evolving dyad. And it's in the book, if people want to go deeper, but
good. It's
yeah.
so transformative. I mean, I'm just, as you're talking, I'm like, this is what everybody needs to go into family gatherings, whether it's Thanksgiving or Hanukkah or Christmas or Kwanzaa or whatever the holiday is, and sitting across and talking politics or issues going on in the world. It's like, if we can communicate like this, well, tell me something. So it's about understanding the other person and their point of view, and not agreeing or, pushing your rightness in their face. Yeah. Trying to convince them otherwise.
My son, my teenage son, and I'll take out the topic and I'll just do, tell me something you want me to understand about you right now. But something you want me to understand about you as a human being right now, and it's really beautiful. And then after a while he rolls his eyes and he's like, oh,
yeah, it's like
exercise.
How old is he? How old is your son?
He's 14 and a half.
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, I was like, does he even like, I would think I would be rolling my eyes at my mom if she was trying to have those deep conversations, but I'm sure just being around that and even having some practice that it transforms, his ability to relate, which is so beautiful. What a gift.
One of the things I like to do is tell me how you feel loved, because I tell you I love you all the time, but how do you actually experience love? So then I get that information and I understand like, okay, it's not about that. It's about listening to a song together because he's really into music, and those are the same things we do with our partner. We can say, I love you all day long. I love you. I love you. But to know how they feel loved, that's love.
My gosh. This whole dyad thing is just earth shattering for me. Okay. Give us one more. Tell me something. Okay. So the relationship evolving dyad, but just this children, like what's one more that you sit, and whether it's with Ian or him or someone in your workplace, what's another big one that we can take away of tell me something. This is so big.
Tell me something that's really important to you right now. Then I get to know like what they're passionate about and what's important to them. And understand them. Tell me something that's really hard for you right now. Tell me something that's bringing you pleasure. Like I love coming up with these.
Yeah, it's so good. And then you just sit, you listen, you receive, you take it in. Then you ask them if you need more clarification. What are the three things again?
If it's clarify that, summarize that, or say it again. Because sometimes I just space, I lose contact.
Okay.
And one of the things that is taught also in accelerated evolution and these processes is contact is the carrier wave of consciousness and intimacy. So when we have this contact with another human being where we're giving them our full presence and we're seeking to understand them, we now are in a carrier wave of consciousness and intimacy.
Oh my gosh, it's such a generous way to show up in any relationship, whether it's parent, partner, employee.
Especially when we've got these things in front of our faces most of the time.
Yes, totally. Oh my gosh, to be present, to be in contact. And then that person can't help but feel seen, which is all we really want and need in life as humans, right?
Yep. We all want to feel seen. And yet we have so much struggle seeing ourselves even. Who are we? That's one of the big questions in the book is who are we as erotic beings? How are we seeing ourselves? And are we seeing the truth of who we really are? Are we seeing all of the programming and stuff that got layered on? What's the game we've been playing? And do we want to play a new game around our sexuality?
Yeah. And if we're little fractals of divinity, and as, Jesus, who many think is the Son of God, and there's many interpretations of his life, but if he represented and was trying to teach that what I do, we all do, and we all are sons and daughters of God. I just feel like as you were talking there, like this is kind of the final frontier of personal development and growth and enlightenment, because as I see you and like your practices, it's like that's the element that's necessary for us to be these little gods and goddesses, what God intended for us to be. We're little divine rays of the sunshine, and we got to embrace our inner gods and goddesses. And that shows up as like, in our sexual energy and our like embodiment and pleasure, and joy, and boom, I love it. Oh my God, now I'm beaming, I'm blushing. I'm ready.
I love that you brought up, Jesus and Christ. And I think something that's interesting just around religion is how the feminine got taken out. And then that sort of pulled sexuality out as well. And so one of the things I love studying is sacred union. Like, what are all the sacred relationships throughout every religion? And what are the practices of sacred union within every religion? Usually it's in the mystical aspects, like Christian mysticism. That's where we get Mary Magdalene, and we start to, see the stories about Mary Magdalene and Mary Magdalene's gospel. And I've done deep study on her. I even wrote a play about her that I tour around with every now and then. And it's so fascinating to me how the feminine gets less important as a spiritual teacher, or taken out of the story completely, or hidden in some way, or the secret teachings, which were usually done through art and imagery and not through written word, because they would get persecuted, for writing things down. And so the idea of the God goddess coming into union, coming into one, and these teachings within almost all religions across the board, they're there. You just have to know where to look. And then who were these women? Who were the powerful women with their sexuality and their aliveness and their eroticism as part of the spiritual teaching? And, mystics in their own right, and teachers in their own right, and Buddhas in their own right. That's just something I encourage people to do, is like, if you're curious about these things and you're curious about your own sexual awakening, go on the hunt for finding these archetypal energies and how they practiced, what this heart-centered sexuality that was not demonized, how was that practiced?
Mary Magdalene and Jesus is a good example. I've started to go down that path, and I agree. It's just fascinating, and it's clear, we have been written out of so much of history for power control, whatever. We don't need to. That's a different podcast episode. But just one. What would be one Mary Magdalene book for someone that's like, oh, that sounds interesting. What's like? Is it the Magdalene manuscripts, or like what?
I love the Magdalene manuscript. That's a very, like, it's Egyptian tantra, like a form. Egyptian tantra sounds funny, but it's Egyptian sacred sexuality, but has a lot of tantra in it. That's one of my favorites. But recently, there's a 3-part series by Kathleen McGowan. The first book is called The Expected One, and it's historical fiction, but she even has, like, in the notes in the back, like, this isn't so much fiction. I really, really enjoyed that series. I just read it over the summer. And if you like fiction that's historical, but kind of not fiction,
action.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, where can people find you, your Blueprint for Pleasure book, and some programs and, other offerings that you share?
The book is available anywhere books are sold and online, so people can find that. I highly encourage people supporting their local bookstores. Most of them should have it, or you can ask them to order it if they don't. And then finding me, I'm Jaiya.love. So JAIYA.love. JAIYA.love is my website. If you want to take the quiz, you can check that out at eroticbreakthrough.com. And that's where you can find also, like, courses, and you'll get in, inside of our community and all the good things. Yeah, we have events and courses, and lots of things going on. And like I said at the beginning, I'm a very busy woman.
You are.
But it doesn't feel that way. It always feels like I'm just serving, I'm just serving my dharma, and sexuality in this lifetime is my dharma. And so, I mean, as much as even the moments where I'm like, I'm done, it always calls me back somehow.
Well, it sounds like a fun, pleasure-filled dharma. But thank you for leading, so many of us back to that truth, that big truth within ourselves that so many of us have, stuffed into the shadows. So thank you for the amazing work you do. Thank you for being the bright light that you are and the loving light that you are. And everybody get this book and discover your blueprint, because it's game changing.
Thank you so much for having me and just being willing to have the conversation. I know it still makes you blush, but just, I feel like if one person is affected and changed, it's always worth it to just have these conversations. And if we start to shift the collective where this isn't so taboo, I've done my life's work.
I agree. And you're doing amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Heal Podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. And please rate and review us so that we can grow and reach more people. Thanks so much, and be well.